We are back now with our panel of local legal experts helping us break down the Derek Chauvin trial. UNC law professor Ted Shaw, Cami Chavis, professor of law at Wake Forest University, and Elon law professor Steve Friedland. Let's talk some more about the defense team's focus. Steve, we also heard from Floyd's girlfriend about his addiction. What role does that play?
Well, the defense is trying to create a different frame for the jury. They're focusing on the drugs. The drugs caused the requirement or a need for greater restraint, and the drugs killed him or helped kill him. So they're trying to move that to the center and move the video out of the center. So there's going to be a big battle. That's what the defense has already started. They're going to continue that.
For the first time, we were able to see the evidence found inside the patrol car and George Floyd's SUV. A forensic scientist testified that agents found drugs but didn't test them until the defense requested a second search. Ted, what's the significance of her mentioning the defense asked for a second search, and does it hurt or help the defense's case?
Well, let me first point to the fact that there's a long history of evidence being planted in some circumstances. And so that's certainly what came into my mind. I don't know if it'll come into the mind of any jurors, but let's assume that, in fact, consistent with his girlfriend's testimony, that he was, in fact, using some drugs. I think they got that out there, anticipated it. It's not going to be a surprise. And then they put on a lot of evidence to the effect that that's not what killed him. That's not why he died. So that's the significance, I think, of putting that out there. A lot of Americans take all kinds of drugs for all kinds of reasons, and I think that they were basically trying to take the sting out of that defense.
There was a heated moment in the courtroom today. Dr. Lindsay Thomas was asked by the defense if she removed the officers as a factor in George Floyd's death and how she would classify his death. She answered overdose. The prosecution then countered and asked her to classify his death using all the evidence, and she said it was the use of force from officers. Cami, is this back and forth confusing to a jury?
You know, I think it could potentially be confusing to jurors because you've got to be very, very precise. It sounds like you've said one thing and now you're saying another thing. But what the prosecution is trying to do there is trying to be very specific and saying once you had all of the information, then how would you classify it? And then that's when she says the use of force.
Steve, some have said after hearing from so many in law enforcement this week that Chauvin should be allowed to take the stand in his own defense. What do you think, and would it help or hurt his case?
Well, generally, the defense attorney is probably going to try to avoid having the defendant take the stand. Then we become a question of who you believe. But if the defense thinks that it can help the case, that there's so much evidence that shows to the contrary, that'll be a decision that probably is going to be made right at right before they start, because they're not going to make it now. They want to see how the evidence unfolds and how they think the case is going.
Also, there's a lot working against Chauvin, and perhaps his defense counsel may think that things have gone in a direction where he can't hurt himself any more than he's been hurt, and he may be able to say something that makes people feel sympathetic, people in the jury. However, there's a lot of danger in taking the stand, and particularly for this defendant. If I were a prosecutor, I'd ask about his hands in his pocket. That kind of cavalier, I'm doing this because I can. I think there's a lot of danger in his taking the stand. I'm still going to be surprised if he does, but there's nothing usual about this trial.
This is a question for all of you. Is it possible to know right now about how long this trial will continue on for?
My understanding is that there are over 400 potential witnesses listed, and so that suggests several weeks. But this is again, it is sometimes a game of strategy. You may decide you don't need this witness, or this witness has become less helpful to you, or depending on how you think the case is going, you may need to have those additional witnesses on the list. So I think it is difficult to say at this point, but we know that there are hundreds of potential witnesses.
Have about 10 seconds. A quick answer from Steve, then Ted.
Oh, I agree. There's going to be a rebuttal case, probably from the prosecution, and then may keep going.
Yeah, I think it's hard to say how long this is really going to go. It's going to be the call of the defense if they think they can make any headway, and we just have to see.
All right, Cammie, Steve, Ted, thank you all so much for your expertise and your time today. If you want to share any of their insight, we're going to post all of this on our website and YouTube page.